Hello, I'm John Coleman from Apocatastasis, an Institute for the Humanities, an alternative college and high school here on New Milford, Connecticut, USA. The purpose of this live broadcast, thanks to your donations and recording, is to celebrate with you our 11th anniversary. Here we are, live or after the fact, on Holy Saturday. And that is the birthday of our dear college. And so, uh, much like Easter and much like other connected holidays, it bounces around every year. Holy Saturday does. And so here we are, 11 full years in. Uh, so much to say, and I think we'll get cracking. Not before you have your song. And that is uh, part of, say, the dual mythologies, which it is impossible to understand our work without having a firm grasp on. One of those is the Christian mythology of the resurrection of Jesus. The other is that surrounding the Easter rising of 1916. When I use the word mythology, I'm using this in a very specific way. I do not mean a made up story when I say mythology. I mean a story with significance attached to it by this or that community. So, having said that, we have a shmush up of two different songs here. They follow the same tune, but they are two songs, one of which is The Foggy Jew, and the other is The Men of 22. And they deserve to be together more often than not. Most people don't know about the Men of 22. In any case, 'twas down the glen one Easter morn to a city fair rode I. There armed men of arching men in columns passed me by. No pipes did hum, no battle drum did sound its dread tattoo, but the angelus spare o'er the leafy swell rang out in the foggy June. Right proudly high over Dublin town they flung out the flag of war. 'Twas better to die 'neath an Irish sky than a Suvla Arsud El Bar. When from the plains of royal Meath strong men came hurrying through, was Britannia's Huns with their great big guns sailed in through the foggy June. Oh, the night fell black and the rifles crack made perfidious all being real. In the leaden rain 7 tongues of flame did shine o'er the lines of steel. By each shining blade a prayer was made that to Ireland her sons be true. When the morning broke, sure the war flag shook its folds in the foggy June. 'Twas Britannia bade our wild geese go, that small nations might be free. But their lonely graves are be Suvla's waves, or the fringe of the great North Sea. Oh, had they died by Pierce's side, or fought with Cahill Bruin, all their names we'd keep where the Fenians sleep, 'neath the shroud of the foggy June. All the bravest fell, and the requiem bell tolled mournfully and clear. To those who died that Easter tide in the springing of the year, whilst the world did gaze in deep amaze at those fierce men but few, who flung their lives in the barn of Will beneath a foggy June. Well, back through the glen I rode again, my heart with grief was sore, For I'd parted with those gallant men, whom I'll never see no more. But to and fro in my dreams they go, and I'll kneel and I'll pray for you. For slavery's fled, oh glorious dead, when you found me the foggy June. I'll sing no song of the long ago, of the warriors staunch and bold, who tramped the hills with all their spears in the golden days of old. But I'll raise a ran for our own dear lads, the loyal, the brave and true, who flung their lives in the Bannock Vale, our warriors of 22. When they heard the sound of a cause laid low, they sprung to their guns again. And the finest all were the first to fall, the glory of our fighting men. In days to come, when with pike and drum shall you sing their glories true, when their praise you sing, let the echoes ring with the memory of Cahill Brewer. Brave Liam Lynch on the mountainside fell a victim to the foe. Denny Lacy too for Ireland died at the Glen of Ahelloa. Neil Boyd and Quinn from the north come down to stand with the faithful few, and will sing their praise in the freedom days, our heroes of 22. Some fell in the proud red rush of war, and some be the treacherous foe, like the martyred four in Dublin town and their comrades at Trombone, and 100 more in the barrack square and be lonely roadside tune. Oh, they died with pride, those men who died are martyrs of 22. Well, they held the fight and they fought for right, and they rest in the peace of God. Lift up your heart, you brave young men, and tramp in the ways they trod. For the cause still calls that call to them, and the fight it will only be won when freedom comes to the land that was loved by the warriors of 22. So there you go, two ballads put back to back, very appropriate. The Foggy Jew, which I believe was written originally as a poem by a Franciscan priest who ministered in 1916 to the wounded and the dispossessed. And then The Men of 22, written by IRA section leader Daith O'Connell, and putting them back to back there. It definitely begs a few additional verses to do the transition between 1916 and 1922, which I'll probably write some fine day. All right, so you got your song in, and if you're interested in particularly the mythological aspect of 1916, the rising as it regards Apocatastasis, you may see my recent recording, Who Fears to Speak of Easter Week? And I get into that as a leitmotif, or as a sacrament, shall we say, of what education in a generation rightly instilled can produce. It can produce agency, and when agency is organized and disciplined, it produces results. As long as it is not organized and disciplined, it's just a bunch of people pecking away at their keyboards and drinking cups of coffee and talking about how bad things are. Without discipline and stability and execution, all ideas remain ideas. So I get into an example which we might learn from. This presentation, however, is entitled As True as the North Star on the 11th anniversary of Apocatastasis. And these remarks will eventually be stitched along with the remarks of Who Fears to Speak of Easter Week and some other recordings I've judiciously been putting out there. These are all going to be stitched together into a major essay entitled We Are the Marsher Lords. And it will look at the vocation of the teacher and of the student. And once again, reiterate the vision, the praxis, indeed the discipline that has kept us going here at Apocatastasis these 11 years. And the vision, the praxis, and the discipline, which will assist any serious learner and any serious teacher who wishes to go off the reservation and actually get back to the roots of their vocation, back to the service that we offer the Republic. So that is a forthcoming essay, likely to be released on Easter Saturday. This is Holy Saturday. Next Saturday is Easter Saturday. We Are the Marsher Lords. Stay tuned for that. But appropriate to our gathering here, we must consider where we came from. What was the situation in 2013? Yes, 2013, Holy Saturday of 2013. We, as educators and as students, were presented in that time with a terrific scheme, the college loan crisis. This was the cynical selling of the youth to bankers in order to get their college credential. And this produced a situation where men were not paying off these debts, if they pay them off at all, not by their 40s or their 50s, which had all sorts of ripple effects in other aspects of life, not the least of which is starting a family. The college loan crisis, a disgusting feature of the early 2000s that has not gone away. We were presented in 2013 with a situation, all of these percolating for decades before, of the abuse of teachers. Much attention has been given to the shortchanging of students in modern schools, public, private, and home. And no attention, it seems, is given to teachers. Now, I am broadcasting this from Holy, Connecticut, and a part of that has to do with the ugly aspect of the American character, and that is the contempt of knowledge. There is a definite anti-intellectual streak in America, and unfortunately for me, this is actually more pronounced in, oddly enough, alternative education circles. In any case, there is across the board in these United States, in particular, an abuse of teachers. And there was in 2013 many, many stories. You think I'm exaggerating? No. Many stories of adjunct teachers living in bushes, adjunct college professors, living in their offices, dying, many of them. In fact, there are several articles, if they have not yet been scrubbed, entitled Death of an Adjunct. So we were presented in those days with that, the total bastardization of the teaching profession, and indeed the disgraceful behavior of American societies, and particularly American parents, in the payment of the teachers they so benefit from. We can, in the meta sense, not forget the insult which modern pedagogy, private, public, and home, gives to the dead generations past. I should not call it education. I should call it schooling, and I'll make that distinction soon enough, because a thing lately clicked for me. Something clicked very recent to this broadcast. So, modern schooling insults the dead generations past. The loves, the hates, the debates, the actions of those who walk this earth before us, those down at the cemetery, those voices which speak from our shelves, though they, the authors, have gone on. Modern schooling is an insult to this and the energies given. There are men who spent their entire lives writing a book. There are some men who spent their entire lives writing a chapter. And to see how cavalierly this knowledge is treated in these schools and the type of presumptuous people it produces is an insult. It's an insult to the dead generations past. This is called piety. To be upset about this is called piety. Piety does not mean going to a 501c3 church and burning a candle for $5. Piety does not mean giving $100 to some televangelist. Piety does not mean going in some holy rolling procession with a statue of a saint down the road. That is not piety. Piety is honoring the dead generations past. It is a pre-Christian concept, and it is one, as regards education, we ought to recover. If we speak of the abuse of teachers in 2013, when Apocatastasis was established, we would indeed be wrong to forget the waste of life which modern schooling foists upon the young. The Immaculate God has given to young people a tremendous chapter in their lives. And when I say this, I am not saying this in the sense of sentimentality or the sense of the American childhood and all the garbage which attends that discussion and presentation and that whole aspect. I mean, for the bourgeois, their children are basically pets. For the middle class, the child, and in fact, it's there's much to say about that designation of middle class, but let's just say nowadays children are basically big pets, and that it is not with that tone of voice that I'm speaking of the special chapter in the lives of youth which modern schooling deprives them of. I'm speaking of a very special, principally spiritual chapter in their lives, which is muted and dulled and tarnished by modern schooling, public, private, and home. And we would be remiss to not address the young people in that. We were in 2013 presented with a ponderous system of tyranny. Things everyone complains about, strangers in dark costumes who can shake you down for money on the side of the road, insurance creeps on top of insurance creeps, insuring other insurance creeps, a fearful regime of barratry which has claimed jurisdiction over every aspect of life. A system of jobbing. These are massive, massive swindles. To work for another man is bad enough, but to want to create generations where men are taught, not like a good slave that this is your lot, but to actually be taught that you want this. The concept of the job, enormous swindle. We are faced in 2013 with the incipient days of social media and the manipulation of affection and the manipulation of, indeed, psychology, which produced such bizarre social behavior in the decades since. Coming more close to home, of course, we could speak of the ponderous tyranny as it expresses itself in violence in the prison industrial complex and in many other ways. But there is a system of enormous malice and enormous discipline. If you hear me and you get tired of me calling on us for discipline and stability, well, don't worry. You can keep getting pissy at me for this. The bad guys are very disciplined and they are very stable. And that's why they apparently run the world, and we do not. But indeed, returning to the academic in 2013, in those dark and evil days, which saw the glimmer of Apocatastasis come down from heaven, we saw dreams deferred. We saw many people with aspirations professionally who wanted knowledge, and the ponderous system, indeed, of those college loans deferred those dreams. These cannot be forgiven. These violations, every single one, every single child who had their youth tarnished, every single teacher who had their idealism tarnished, every, I will not swear, every work and pomp of those systems of tyranny, these things cannot be forgiven or forgotten. They can only be destroyed. And that is what we've been doing for 13 years. Dreams deferred. I would be remiss in all this, speaking of these sorts of things, to not mention the abuse of parents in this system. The playing on of fears. There's a certain natural affection most normal people have for their children, even if they're not pets, as the bourgeois are taught to look at their children as. There is fueling, particularly the college conveyor belt, let's say, a great manipulation of parents' affection for their children. And this was done, and this too cannot be forgotten and cannot be forgiven. The only thing that can be done is to dismantle these systems of oppression. We found in 2013 a culture which was in the gutter, a deracination of enormous scope. Most of us do not know who our great-grandparents were, could tell you nothing about them. A fair number of us could tell us nothing of their grandparents even, beyond their names and a few trivial points. We do not know why the streets we drive on are named the way they are. We do not know the national songs of our state or our region. We do not have a religion. And if we do, it's a parody of whatever those traditions might have historically been known as. We have been warred upon. We have been told to relocate. We move around. Some bastard landlord has a lease. We're out of the house. On the 1st of May, we're going to have an all-day event for St. Joseph the Worker. And we're going to talk about stability. We're going to talk about stability. It is not normal to move out of your parents' homes. It is not normal to change jobs. It is not normal to not live in the house that you were born in and raised in. In fact, it's not normal to not be born in the house you live in. We are living in a very unnormal world, and we must speak about stability. But we found, in any case, in 2013, a culture in the gutter, and we have lifted that culture from the gutter. These were the dark and evil days when the Immaculate God, through the Republic, through the voices of the dead generations past, speaking from the cemetery, speaking from the shelves, sent down Apocatastasis and established the Institute. I am noticing what you are noticing. That is, in the past 11 years, nothing at all of those dark and evil days have changed. There is still the college loan crises. Parents are still manipulated. Teachers are terribly swindled and abused in many ways in this system, as are students. The ponderous tyrannies which we saw in 2013 have only perfected their systems of control, and the other ponderous tyrannies which seek to kick out the legs of culture, kick out the legs of stability, kick out the legs of the interpersonal, they have continued their work. And so those ponderous systems of tyranny are stronger, in fact, than they were in 2013. And the culture, lift as we might, like Sisyphus, is still in the gutter. In fact, it's 11 more years in the gutter. Does this lead us to being discouraged? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Victory in any work, whether you're fixing your car, you're cutting your grass, you're fighting an enemy army, whatever simile you want, victory in any work is not surrendering. You and I were told that to conquer opposition means to destroy your problem, to solve your problem. That your problem no longer exists, X, Y, and Z problem. You have conquered the enemy army. You have mowed the grass. You have taken off that lug nut. That is not victory. That might be victory, but victory in say is not giving up, never surrendering, always going ahead with the plan, always swinging muskets. And you and I, these 11 years, have done that with the assistance of the Immaculate God and the assistance of those voices of the dead generations past and their example. We have pushed on for 11 years. It is now appropriate to get to the principle and foundation of Apocatastasis. For these 11 years, this book has been our constitution. This book has been our Bible. Not hurt. The Trotsky train, some words to the discipulate. I wrote this book way back when. It kicked my ass out of Ridgefield, and I only wish it had done so sooner. In any case, back before I learned to put page numbers on the books I published, the good old days. What is our principle and foundation? Because if we do not have principles, we have nothing. We have nothing if we do not have principles. And this work has been as true as the North Star these 11 years because we have stuck to our principles, come hell or high water. I recite, quote, "Only when there's stability to society, when men own their capital, when they memorize the poetry of the land, when local musical compositions and books proliferate, when the churches are packed each morning, standing room only for lauds, and the same twice over for Sunday Mass. When the scholar, then he can take a cigarette break, but only for a minute before he's back at it again. It is your work, it is my work. There is your end to education. There is your wealth. There is your success. When there are no more attorneys on Holy Connecticut, when there are no more banks on Holy Connecticut, when there are no more ghostwriters on Holy Connecticut and all their works and pomps and morbidity, when there are no bastard landlords, when these things have been scourged from the land, when that military base in Danbury is closed down, and when there is no longer the United States Corporation flag flying over Connecticut, when there is not one man in this state and in this nation and in this world who is swindled to give his labor to another in a job, when the money no longer devaluates, when there are no bums on the street, when the churches are unlocked, when the churches are full, when the synagogues are full. Hey, bring in the Jews, tell them to stop killing the Arabs. Tell them we'll build synagogues in Connecticut. They can stop butchering the Arabs. When the Arabs are stopped being butchered. When this time comes, when we appreciate our culture, we start making our own art. We don't pump in art from a continent away in California or London. And I can go on and on. When these things instantiate, then our work will be done for a minute. We will not take a break till then. And we have for these 11 years forged ahead on these points, keeping our eyes on the principle and foundation laid out in this book. Some words to the discipulate, the Trotsky train, laid out. This has been our constitution these 11 years. We have not wavered from that one iota, come what may. Education is not schooling. You know, I used to wonder things. I still wonder many things. One of which is why I was never able to fit in. Why I never was able to fit in all those years in Ridgefield. All these years in Apocatastasis. How many blow-ups, especially with these so-called homeschoolers? How many annoyances, how many failures of tuition? I could never understand it. You would treat these people like gold. You would treat them like gold, and you would not be treated that way back. And then it occurred to me just a couple weeks ago. A light went on. Alhamdulillah, a light went on. And this was a similar light that I had with public school years ago. Right? We were all banging our heads against the pavement. Look at public school. And look at this is happening, and they're dumbing us down. And there are agendas. And there are so many agendas. And look at the people it's producing, and look at the how they look at the world. And it's clearly the result of manipulated textbooks and whatnot. And we would look at the waste of time. I'm just talking on the clock that happens in public school. And we would see this, that, and the other. We would see also so much psychological problems. And when it came to that topic, a few things were presented to me in the course of the years. One of which was a public school board president. A good man. He was from Long Island. His name escapes me, but you will hear from him again, because he was a very active and very, very capable and enthusiastic man. Michael Hines. I believe his name was Michael Hines, and he was responsible for, at that time, we'll say 5 years ago, a school board on Long Island. He had written a book, and he was very involved in pedagogy, and he had traveled to Europe and observed some. And it was Michael Hines who told me, John, you people, all you people critiquing education, you think we're leading around the American population by the nose, and we're leading them down into nonsense and inanity. And you think we are slipping when it comes to discipline and comportment, etc., in the schools. No, John, he says to me. No. It is we, professionals in the public schools, who are trying to catch up to the slovenliness of the American population. And that changed things for me, because as I noticed things, actually, he was right. Actually, look at the people in the street when you drive around. Look how they hold themselves. Right? Go into the public schools. They're very professional there. I've called up public schools for transcripts and things at 7 o'clock in the morning in summer, and I've had principals pick up. I'm not making that's a real story. I've called up public schools at 7 o'clock in the morning because I had things to do. I wanted to leave a message, and the principal himself picked up. I've had that happen. The public school teachers get back to me when I leave messages for different things, usually transcripts, as I say. They get back to me when they have events, for learning disabilities and whatever. They advertise. They get people to show up at those events. Those are very informative events. The public school administrators are very capable. They're not the bad guys. So anyway, that was something I realized. It's something else I realized as regards public school, and I'm going to turn my attention elsewhere in this presentation, was indeed the adjective public, right? If you don't like those agendas, well, you should probably open up a legal dictionary and see the word public. It means commercial, right? The purpose of the public schools is to make public commercial workers. And of course you have to dumb people down. And of course you have to tarnish their wonder and their curiosity. If you create a person with a vibrant mind in a public school, you are doing them a disservice, because you are training them to have a job, and somebody who still has a sparkle in their eye could never be satisfied with a job. So once you understand what public means, everything makes sense. And what, are you going to get angry at the public schools because they announce it on their marquee that they are public and their job is to make a dulled, gray, dumpy, middle-aged worker? That's their purpose. And they do an excellent job about it. Once you actually realize the terms that the system operates on, they stop being the bad guy. But getting back to my initial point, I used to wonder on a personal level, what is it about these alternative schools and these alternative schooling modalities, some of which I've already alluded to? Why can't I fit in with these people? And then it just the past couple of weeks, it occurred to me, they want to be schooled. I'm here to educate. They want schooling, right? So if you're in public school, private school, or homeschool, you're being schooled. You're being schooled. Of course, somebody who's trying to educate you is not going to be well received. Finally, I understood. It took me 20 years, but I finally understood why you could never work with these homeschoolers, for instance. They would always stab you in the back. They would always half-ass it. And it finally occurred to me, they want to fit into the system just as much as the public schoolers do. Yeah, they want a little less cussing. Yeah, they want to be a little less diligent, a little bit more informal. But at the end of the day, they want to succeed in the herd. Education is not schooling. And you're going to hear me talk more and more about this because we have to come to terms. And one of the realities is in this so-called alternative education, so-called movement, is there are a lot of people that have one foot in both worlds. In fact, they have most of their body, so to speak, in this simile, in the world of the herd, but they like to keep a toe in the alt world, right? It feels cool to talk about government brainwashing camps, and it feels cool to be a badass with your homeschool curriculum, and that's great. And you can look at all those crazy liberal teachers on TikTok, and you can roll your eyes, and you can ignore that they're probably being on the same soundstage that they do all the fake school shootings on. No, you can think you're really seeing crazy liberals, and aren't you glad you're such a badass and you got your curriculum and now you're around the kitchen table. But in reality, you have the same baggage. All you even the unschoolers and the road schoolers. I'm not just on the homeschoolers back here. Why? We need to listen. If you want to be alternative, be alternative. And if you want to be part of the schooled herd, be part of the schooled herd. But you want a foot in both worlds. And that's what I'm seeing in a lot of these so-called alternative eddies, right? You want to have your cup of coffee and your fag and talk about, how the world's falling down, but you don't seriously want to change things. You don't really have that revolutionary fire. You want to talk about it. Oh, you'll talk about it. You'll listen to a bazillion podcasts and become smug as you please. Smug as a ghostwriter, you might say. But at the end of the day, you just want to be schooled. So anyway, that was a great insight I've gotten the past few weeks. Thank God. The next point I'd like to bring up on our 11th anniversary is indeed that God and the Republic created Apocatastasis, and that we, the staff and students and myself at the Institute these 11 years, have merely been the custodians of this work. When there's a bill due, when tuition isn't being paid, when there's a headache, when I get another wall of text email, right? That's not my problem. That's God's problem. That's the dead generations past's problem. We're simply holding this work for God and the Republic. We are simply pushing ahead with their energy and with their insights. We're simply holding the bags for those greater than us, our dead ancestors, our culture instantiated. I mean, that's all our culture is the leavings spiritually of our ancestors. Only holding the bag for the immaculate God. God and the Republic created Apocatastasis. You're not going to be able to destroy it. Any problem this world can throw at us, it's not going to destroy this work. Everything comes from ideas. Everything comes from ideas. This pencil came from somebody who had an idea. This piece of paper and this sticky note, the whole concept of the sticky note, came from an idea. This pewter mug, I hope it's pewter, not lead. This pewter mug that I've been swilling out of all these years, this came because somebody thought this would be a good idea. The coffee, the psychopath coffee with no sugar or milk, 10 spoons of grounds in it, 5 ounces. The psychopath coffee came because I thought it would be a good idea to put in the mug that somebody thought would be a good idea to make. Everything comes from ideas. And that is why we are doing this work in the classroom and beyond. The way we are taught to ingest reality has a lot to do with how reality looks. Reality, I don't want to give you a linguistics lecture here, just a little one. Reality comes from the Latin word re, which means thing. In Latin, there's a word called re, and the idea of thing is it's a tangible thing. It's not a concept. That would be ens. Re is a thing. So re is actually something of a poverty of the English language that we have the word reality, because there are true things which are not tangible. In any case, ideas, everything in reality, in physical, I'm being very specific with this word of reality, everything in the visual, physical, real space. The Catholics have this term, the real presence, right? The real presence, that's actually jagging off of this point. It's not like you hear Catholics and they're like, oh, look, it's like Jesus is really there, man. That's true, but that's not how that adjective is being used in real presence. Real in real presence means physical. It's an old-fashioned word for physical. Reality is the physical, visible order. In any case, the social systems we see and the enormous tyranny that is upon this earth right now came from one generation teaching the subsequent generation to think and act in certain parasitic ways that generation, when they become dumpy middle-aged parents, turn around and download into their children, turning them into parasites, and so it goes. We need to have a different approach to how we ingest knowledge and understand what is knowledge and what is the life of the mind and towards what end are we going. Well, we at Apocatastasis these 11 years have been going in the direction of our principle and foundation, already referenced and recited. To weather every blow is worth this. To keep our eyes on the prize of where we're going. We're as true as the North Star. Why? Because the staff and students these 11 years have asserted this? No. Because we have verbed it. We have verbed this excellence for 11 years. For 11 years, we have taken how many kisses from Judas? How many blows? How many laughs? How many mediocre people who have wasted so much time? Forgettable people. How much of this have we taken? How many failures of tuition? How many failures? How many coulda, woulda, shouldas? You don't even want to know how much money we've been promised by people who sincerely love what we're doing over these. Forget about tuition defaults. I'm just talking, a lot of coulda, woulda, shouldas. Oh, John, just wait. I'll get you the money and all sort. You realize you do this work long enough. You realize everyone's full of hot air. All near enough to everyone, because a few diamonds in the rough have shown over the years. God has sent them our way, and we have benefited greatly from these souls. You do this work and you will find out the people you think would be your biggest supporters, they are your biggest enemies. They are even traitors. Sometimes the traitors live off of Candlewood Lake and pick up telephones and say disgusting things after years of faithful service. Sometimes that behavior expresses itself in other fashions. In any case, none of it daunts us. None of it daunts us. So what did Cardinal Newman say? 1,000 difficulties do not equal one doubt. 1,000 difficulties do not equal one doubt. We will take every tantrum, every pule, every knife in the back, every kiss by every Judas in the land, that our principle and foundation be established, that there be no more bastard landlords. No, there will not be a bank left on Connecticut before we're through. There will be no more attorneys, and the day will come when people will not even be able to mentally grasp what barratry was and the slavery that their ancestors lived under through legality and the legal person. These days are coming, and it is this that we keep our eyes on. There will be no more dreams deferred. There will be no more parents that are abused by bastard bankers into college loan schemes. There will be no more teachers that freeze and sleep in their car and die on their front lawns. That day is coming, and for that we have soldiered on, you and I, and all the students and staff of the Institute. Yes, though there have been many coulda, woulda, shouldas. Let them go their way. May their chains sit lightly. We have pushed on for 11 years, and we have done a mighty thing. We have done a mighty thing, and we have done a patriotic thing, and we have done a work of piety. Everything we have done these 11 years has been a work of piety, not piety by going to your local 501c3 church and saying this, that, or whatever. That's not piety. Saying your rosary every day is not piety. Going to your mosque every Friday is not piety. Piety is honoring your culture. Piety is ennobling your culture, ennobling your fellows. Piety is living on the best of your ancestors. This is piety. At one time, the Christians knew this word. Now it's become watered down like all of modern Christianity. At one time, people knew what this word was. Now it's become a parody. Every work of Apocatastasis has been a work of piety, and we have kept our eyes on the North Pole these 11 years. With your assistance, with your support, your encouragement, your emails, your fellowship, thank you very much. Personally, I say this as well. Thank you very much. As we bring the bird down, do keep an eye out in a week's time on Easter Saturday. We will have a major essay released entitled, "We Are the Marsher Lords." And it will encompass these ideas, and it will encompass many other ideas. We are leading in this institute. We are leading the educational world. And with a few more backs to the wheel and a few more heave-hoes, we'll get our principle and foundation established. Anyway, it's been a good 11 years. Thank you for your support, and I'll see you in class. With that being said, valete.